Yeah, hi Jennifer. This is Michael. Good to hear from you. Let's take a look at. Let me adjust my pop-up filter here. Okay, let's take a look at your email here, and I'll see if I can give you some information here. So you said, did any of the pre-MBA students pass through into my stretch composition classes through the English department? I'm going to say probably not. A lot of your students are probably going on to graduate study. All of my students are undergraduate students. So in my classes, primarily, I've had a lot of the 1 plus 2 plus 1 Chinese students. I've also had the 1 plus 2 Korean students who came, I think about 150 of them came about a year ago. I've had quite a few of those guys come into my classes over the last year, and they've been going through the 102, 103, 104 series. And this quarter, I have one of our ACLP students in my 102B class. So these are the students that I've been getting in my writing classes over here at California State University. So you asked a question. So what are some of the strengths of the students as I see it or see them? I think that a lot of the international and ACLP students that I'm having, they're pretty good about turning things in on time, and they also are pretty good with attending class. So they're really strong in those areas. Some weaknesses or difficulties might be there's some cultural barriers. It's difficult for them to come talk to me, to come to my office. It's hard for international students to overcome this professor student type relationship, and it's hard for them to come ask me for help. Even when I email them and tell them to come talk to me, many of them will still not do that, especially the first quarter. Now, as they get to know me and they get to know more about academic writing and academic classes in general, they typically, maybe by the second or third quarter, they're feeling more comfortable. And then some of them, particularly those who are failing, they might come in and talk to me for advice. So overcoming some of the barriers and other things are in terms of discussion. When we have classroom discussions and I kind of throw out questions, the questions might be from the assigned reading, an assigned reading in our textbook, or it might be questions relating to our writing assignments. Maybe a difficulty there is there is still a response time. For most of my students, when I ask a question and when somebody answers, the response time could be as long as 40 to 60 seconds. Now, there's usually one or two students that are very quick to respond, but I'm trying to give all students a chance to respond to things. So sometimes I put students into smaller groups because they're more comfortable sometimes sharing their ideas and thoughts within a smaller group as opposed to putting those things out into the class as a whole. So overcoming some of the barriers is always a challenge, like cultural barriers and such. Also, I think a really big problem that I'm having with my international students, and something that we can consider with our curriculum that we're working on with our writing, maybe writing/reading curriculum, is a lot of the international students, they have difficulties. Not only can they not read rhetorically, but it's hard for them to read just for the main points of the text. Remember that in composition classes, in 102 through the 107 classes, we're trying to help students learn critical thinking and reading skills, not just reading for the main idea or the major supporting ideas, but they're supposed to be reading to understand the writer's style or the structure. They're learning how to inference ideas in reading text. They learn how to do mapping and charting type reading techniques. They learn how to penetrate a text on a much deeper level than just the surface. And it's the reading rhetorically that I really, really have a tough time working with my international students, trying to help them to look at not just what the writer is saying, but Jennifer, maybe how or why the writer is doing certain things within that textbook. For example, the other day I was working with my multilingual 102B class, and we were taking a look at an argument. and I looked at a paragraph in the assigned reading, and we were looking at the vocabulary words to see how these words conveyed more negative connotations about a topic. And at this part of the article, it was actually the counter argument. And we were trying to discuss how writers, in very subtle ways, can use certain words. For example, somebody might use the word illegal immigrant as opposed to saying undocumented or illegal alien as opposed to saying undocumented immigrant. And by saying the one word over the other, it kind of changes the tone of the writing, or even saying a word like chubby versus fat. But it's these subtle things like this. It's these little types of vocabulary words that can create a humorous tone, a sad tone, a formal academic or informational tone, or maybe even an argumentative tone. It's really, really tough for my non-native speakers to pick up on the more subtle uses of the language. So that would definitely be something that we could think about looking at even within our own curriculum, is how can we build the vocabulary skills, the reading skills that students need so that they can deeply understand a text and they can begin to apply critical thinking and reading strategies to those texts. See, that's probably a pretty good question we could think about. And even, I'm not even sure if our level 5 has a reading class. So I guess the writing class focuses a lot on the reading, I'm assuming, right? It's a good question. I know that you're teaching the grad writing / reading, right? So you probably, a lot of what I'm talking about, you're working on those kinds of things with those graduate students. So anyway, those are just a few ideas, and thank you for sending me an email, and hopefully I've given you some ideas or whatever about where we're coming from the English department when we're teaching international students in our writing classes. And the one thing that I'll say, that one thing that I really, really enjoy in terms of working with international students is they really do work super, super hard, and they refuse to give up. I'll give you an example. It was not this year, but the year before. I had a student from Saudi Arabia. He wasn't one of our ACLP students, but he was a non-native speaker nonetheless. And he went through my 102, 103, 104 B multilingual classes, and this student was amazing. He had no barriers about coming to my office. He was there. When he had a question, he would come to my office. He worked on his paper, I'm not kidding you, sometimes 9 or 10 drafts before the paper was due. And he went to the writing center several times. So his papers were really, really well written, well thought out, well organized, deeply developed. He had a lot of good thought in his writing. So he was very, very receptive of the process of taking a paper and moving it through different drafts, each time becoming a little bit better and a little bit better. So that's maybe one other thing I forgot to bring up is sometimes, but this isn't really international students. I think this is a difficulty with students in general. Sometimes they can be reluctant to look at writing as a process. They like to look at it as something that they can do in a 2 or 3 day effort without having to make any major changes after the paper's turned in. They want to be done with it, but typically that's not how real writers work. That's not how things work in the real world. Good writers expect to revise, and to revise meaningfully, substantially, right? They do. So getting that concept into students' minds that it's okay to rework your draft, to make organizational changes, to add more development, or to delete things that you don't need. Even though you spend a lot of time writing it, if the paragraph doesn't relate to the thesis, get rid of it. So it's hard for them sometimes to do that. So anyway, thank you very much, and bye-bye.